All right. All right. All right. So I have a special guest appearance. It's my good friend, Vishal Surya, and we're gonna talk about how he got into MIT. Just give some specific advice, and hopefully y'all can take something out of this. So first thing we'll talk about is like the sort of bread and butter, I guess, stats. And what were your stats? And then you have some advice on how you obtain those stats.
Yeah, sure. First, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Vishal. I'm a senior, go to the same school as Fiki, and I'll be attending MIT next year. Uh, Probably pursuing a major in biochemistry, but not certain. But yeah, on stats, the stats I say would first is GPA. I had a 4.0 unweighted GPA, and I think it was like a 4.85 by the time I applied in weighted GPA, which depends on what school you're going to, what classes are offered. But the thing with GPA is that it's not the most important thing about your application, but you definitely need to have a high GPA if you're willing to apply to like top schools. So just minimize as many B's as like get as least amount of B's as possible. Try to get all A's. I mean, there's quite a lot of work just to balance it with extracurriculars as well. But just doing a lot of the work in school and prioritizing school first, like going home, getting all my schoolwork done in an hour. Didn't work junior year because I procrastinated a lot. But definitely just don't procrastinate schoolwork. The most important thing because what I've realized is that for me at least, the less you procrastinate schoolwork, the easier it is. And when you procrastinate it, it actually sucks up more time from extracurriculars, ironically enough. That's a good tip. Next is for SAT. So I took the SAT back when it was still the paper SAT. It was August 2023, I think, and I got a 1590. 800 math, 790 reading, first time taking it. A lot of my advice might not apply to the new digital SAT, which I don't really haven't taken before. But how I studied for that 1590 was I probably did some light-ish studying back in like freshman, sophomore year. But I don't think I really did anything. What I mainly did was in my junior year, before my junior year in that July, I spent a lot of time studying. I spent like 3 to 4 hours a day, probably sometimes, just taking the Khan Academy practice tests and doing their guided questions they have on specific subjects. That's what I found was the biggest. And for math, I did competition math during middle school, which was pretty much sufficient for the SAT.
All right. So do you have like any or what would you say is like do you have any advice on how like MIT like admission officers like recommend like what stats should be or like does it matter or would you say like how important would you weight it? I don't know how they
Yeah. So MIT, like a lot of other colleges, they have it posted on their website, I think, or not website. There's a sheet. I forgot what it's called. There's like a sheet that they have every year posted, which is like what they considered the P important. So if I remember, I forgot what it's called. You can probably find something on the internet from other like YouTube. I don't know. But uh, from there, I'm pretty sure the GPA and statistics were like in stats were important, but they weren't like the big things that mattered. Because they're kind of like, I don't know what the AOs think, first and foremost, right? But from my understanding, talking to a lot of other people, it seems that stats and having good GPA is only like a baseline to get like to get in. Then after that, it's like those essays that really matter.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing I'll say though is that at MIT for sure definitely wants math. You want to have you probably want to have a pretty high math score on the SAT, I would assume. And I know at MIT in terms of for like classes taken, they really want you. And they sent this in the email to us as well. They really want you to have taken like some form of calculus, like probably preferably BC, right? Like physics as well. They really want you to have taken for high school bio and chem. So if you're applying to MIT, my advice would be getting all those classes at least by the time you're applying, you're doing some of them. But do all four of them, like bio, chem, physics, BC. BC and physics, BC being the most important one. For me, I did physics my senior year, so I didn't have that there. But BC is definitely important.
All right, so we'll move into your ECs, and for this one, we'll just talk about like how you got into your ECs in the first place,
Yeah.
and then just sort of what you noticed that most like some like common ECs that MIT applicants have, and the ones that you can use to stand out.
Yeah, for sure. So, the one thing I'll say, perhaps at least, is that a lot of time people like discount certain extracurriculars, especially for MIT, because they're like it won't matter. But to be all honest, I feel like a lot of extracurriculars in MIT matter as much as you make it matter in your essays, like as much as you're willing to make it matter. Because there's a lot of time in your essays to elaborate on it. But first, MIT does their activities weirdly. they have a section on jobs where you can put like your jobs, like internships and paid things. Then they have activities, which I think is like five different activities there. And then they have a separate section where you list out summer activities, where I put like you can put like vacation or whatever or whatnot, or like just summer programs. But I'll go over in first in terms of I'll order it in how the application has it ordered. First is the jobs. So I had an internship between my junior and senior summer working at a research lab in Houston, where we're from. That was really important. I stayed my activity, and I think MIT prop. What I've noticed a lot of people have is good research. I never had something crazy. I didn't have a paper published or anything. I had some like small research like programs I did throughout like my sophomore year, junior year, not really junior year, but before my senior year. And I actually wrote about this a ton on my essays because MIT had a separate research portfolio where you expand upon your projects and you talk about what you learned in it. And I think for research, it in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong. What matters more than having like impressive science fair wins, which I've never done a science fair by the time I entered or applied. I never had a research paper published. But I think like the things you learn from your mistakes and failures in research, right? And how you're able to work in a team. I think that's pretty important if you can highlight that because MIT is a pretty collaborative place, and that's what I made sure to do. I highlighted like the communal nature. Like, I talked about like talking with my PI about the NBA Finals with like Celtics Mavericks, and so it's like those kinds of like fun things. Having fun while also learning a lot, having genuine interest for your research project. I think can definitely go a long way for the AOs. Another job I had was debate tutoring. So I do debate, which we'll get into for activities. And I was tutoring for debate for middle schoolers. Another one was STEM tutoring for my jobs. So yeah. Tutoring is like it's not a bad thing. I didn't really put too much emphasis on my application. I just like listed it there and just like described it. Not too many hours per week. Now for activities, for MIT, unlike the Common App, you only are able to list five activities. So that's a bit different. And that's why for MIT, you need to have probably some pretty consolidated and pretty like impactful things rather than having a lot of like fluff or like a bunch of fluff there. The thing like NHS, like I mean, they're great. I think a lot of people probably had that. I never did NHS, right? So like the point is, even if you don't do those clubs like NHS and stuff, you're not cooked. I didn't do NHS. I never did that as long as you're able to find like five solid activities. The first was Science Olympiad, which is the biggest activity I did in high school. So Science Olympiad is a team science competition. And so by itself, it's like a national competition. And so by itself, Science Olympiad is like, it's not going to get you into like a crazy college by itself, like any activity, in my opinion. But I mean, I was pretty involved with the Scioto community, which kind of shaped some of my essays I wrote about the community essays MIT had. So, and I spent a lot of time on there. Like I posted my own invitationals, volunteered for tournaments. I was captain my junior year as well. That was that, and I spent a lot of time on that. Second was speech and debate, which I've been doing for a really long time, but I did it at all 4 years of high school, which is generally like people don't recommend doing that because it kind of kills their GPA where we go. But I learned a lot from that, and I wrote an essay about that as well, which I can get to later. Then I also talked about some biology competitions I led and such, and I also believe I wrote about or you only have four activities, my bad. You only have four activities to list. And then I also wrote about a research program I did my sophomore year. Then for summer activities, I just went like debate nationals, biology Olympiad national finals, which we can get to in awards, I suppose. Then like some tutoring. I put like table tennis training as well. It was kind of unserious, but that was that.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's just get to honors, how the honor section works on MIT.
So this is actually pretty important for people applying to MIT. Unlike the Common App, where you list five honors, it's the opposite of activities. You have to list like I think 10 honors at maximum. Five of them are scholastic, and five of the other ones are non-scholastic. What you think is, I think if you go on the admission blog about like what PD and the other admission AOs I put, I mean, what counts as non-scholastic and what counts as scholastic, kind of up to interpretation here. But for I'll tell you how I split it up. My scholastic awards, I emphasized the USA Biology Olympiad, where I was one of the top 20 finalists, and I earned the top 12 bronze distinction my junior year. Uh, Probably the most amount of work I put into any extracurricular was in the USABO. I also think if you're applying to MIT, like I strongly emphasize, like if you're doing an Olympiad as well, like if you can put in time to Olympiad and make it work out, that can be a pretty good pretty good boost to the application as well. Not guaranteed, obviously. Nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah.
But if you do good in your Olympiads, that's, pretty good. Rewards, I talked about national medalist in science Olympiad. I talked about like some other biology tournaments. A lot of them were like kind of not really huge awards. I didn't really have many awards for Scholastic, but I had a lot of like I had, like pretty in deep ones, I think, with like biology Olympiad. For the non-Scholastic awards, I just put debate stuff. I put like Presidential Volunteer Service Award, but most of it was just debate stuff, like Tournament of Champions, like Yale speech and debate tournament, nationals qualifying. So that was that for the honors, I believe.
Yeah, so I think one thing is just like a lot of people worry about like having a bunch of awards, but you just have to be very active in a space. And then a lot of
Mhm.
one thing I've noticed is that like if you're active in one EC, that like spawns other things. And so if you could
Yeah.
just start being active with one thing and like be really involved, then your
Mhm.
application will just grow by itself. So I think that's a really good seed to plant is just being active. And then because like a lot of times like did you even think about like when you were like in high school, did you think about the honors you had? Like it just came at the
Mhm.
end, right?
It just all came at
Yeah.
the end. Or, I mean, technically, whenever we do it, like, I mean, like,
Yeah,
let's be
you kind of
honest,
planned it, yeah, but
you
it's not
plan
like,
it, you know, at the end of the mind, right? Like, if you do good in this, it can help in
yeah,
this.
exactly. But you're not keeping track on like
I
a,
mean, that's the
yeah,
point, right?
yeah,
Like, what's funny is that like I forgot about a lot of these, not forgot about a lot of these awards, but only when I was doing applications, I really sit down and like kind of remember like I did all these different
yeah,
things.
exactly. That's one thing really cool about like applications is I like
Mhm.
you realize you're a more interesting person at the end of it all.
No,
And
for sure.
yeah, yeah, like
Yeah.
you learn a lot of things about yourself, a lot of things that you think that you wouldn't write about. That's what
Mhm.
my advice is like you should actually write about them. Like, I don't want to talk too much because it's not my interview, but I
Yeah,
definitely
yeah, yeah.
think.
No, but on that note as well, I definitely think like especially for juniors right now who are seeing this video, it's like April, the way when we're recording this. My advice is to not write your essays now. Start that in the summer. But now at least brainstorm about like specific moments in your life and look at some of the prompts from last year or like this year, like Common App prompts or SUPs, and start thinking about life experiences that match up with that before you write. Because you want to tell stories in your essays. You don't want to tell events and tell things. You want to share stories. So if you can get those like experiences and stories pretty like on point, that's pretty good, or I'd
Yep.
say.
So
And
talk about
also, by the way,
yeah.
what you count as an award, you don't think as an award, just put it in. You'd rather, people think that the award they have don't matter, so they won't put it in there. Literally put everything, even the most inconsequential things you don't matter. Like, I wrote something about like being, it was like some like lab award I got, out of like the 10 people in my internship, right? But I still put that on the application.
Yeah.
Even if it was like a regional award, not like a national level award. Put everything on your application. Nothing, leave nothing up. Like everything about you should be on that application. Yeah,
Yeah, that is definitely true because there's some things that are like, should I put this? But like, as long as it doesn't, it's a very good thing to just like reinforce. Like, if you make a claim that you're very involved in STEM, the more things you have that reinforce it, the better off you will be. So,
definitely.
for essays, what would be your advice? More general and then like specific to MIT? Because the thing about essays is that a lot of colleges weigh different things, and
Mhm.
that's why it makes it really random. So I'm just wondering, okay, what are some general tips, and then what are like specific things that you can talk about in MIT? What would they be like? Oh, okay, this kid clearly wants to go here.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, for MIT, they are completely different in their application than any other college. They don't do the Common App. So besides having to have separate recs, separate everything, you don't have a Common App essay, which for me was great because I despise my Common App essay. I really like well, because when I was applying, right, I knew MIT was going to be my first choice, and I applied early action and got in. So the entire summer, I was only thinking about my MIT subs. And I only worked on my common. Like, I think I spent a total of like 3 days maximum working on my common app, and that was for like the in-state school that I was applying. I don't think I changed it for RD. Not a good idea either. But for MIT, they have their prompts are just very specific. But the one thing I'll say is that so in general for essays, you want to tell stories with them, and you don't want to just like say experiences, but rather just like give them like the vivid and like what you felt during those experiences, right? Like and be unique and you authentic. Don't try to project an image of what you think is a good applicant. Like you can put crazy stuff on there, and I'll actually get into that. One of the essays, which is my favorite essay I've ever written, it was about like it was like, we know you lead a busy life, many of which are required of you, doing a bunch of activities. What's something you do for the pleasure of it? Like I wrote about like rapping. I wrote about Lil Uzi Vert and like listening to their music, which like you don't like. It's a common experience thing that people do. Like it's a common like rapper. A lot of people listen to them, but like guess people don't put that on their apps, right? Obviously, like the point is like even experiences you think like like aren't entirely unique. You can just write about it in your own unique spin, common things that you do that actually are fun. Like I've seen essays on YouTube where it's like drinking boba, right? Through the YouTube video on that for their MIT for fun essay. So really just be yourself and just like I'm someone I know about like frisbee. Like write about what you really like for that prompt and just be authentic. Even if it's like kind of out of the box. Um don't be like, or I guess you can if you're really fun. Like I build like nuclear reactors for fun. You think that'll get you into MIT. Like they're really trying to see like because like the MIT, from what I've heard, is like hard, you know? So you need to have time to decompress and something that will really relax you. But overall, specific to MIT is that I think this was something that I heard whenever I was applying by current students, and this is what they told me, which is they really just want to see like more so than like a liberal arts college, right? Like I know Princeton, Harvard had essays geared towards like like liberal arts education, interdisciplinary sciences, and whatnot. But like MIT's like whatever you do, can you demonstrate that you have like genuine passion for this and like really like unfiltered passion? And this also extends to the interview as well. So, um, for one of the prompts, it's like talk about how you did something that was different in your educational journey or like a trailblazer. It's like they really just want to see like, are you taking your own unique spin to the field you're studying? And are you like that's a pretty weird way to like say it, but are you doing what you can to learn in your own unique way? I think it's something that they definitely prioritize. Like, are you like learning just for the sake of like doing good in a competition, or are you showing that you're going like in like depth and beyond? Like one of my essays, I talked about, I talked about like the role, 'cause I did debate, right? Talked about like social models of disability and how it relates to medical research and ethics. And and I talked about how it related to like the research I was doing and helped me like open my eye to things. You don't have to cure cancer here, but really if like you do something that changed your perspective in a way, right? Or like a failure, a moment in your life that actually changed your perspective on something and how that motivated you to learn further, put that on there for like an essay talks about like a moment you didn't expect or like all those types of things. Just be genuine and just really show some like quirky kind of passion. 'Cause they kind of like I think they kind of like quirky kids, who have like some really nice like interesting side of them to STEM. So don't just be like a cookie cutter STEM person. It's like, like I like building like nuclear reactors in my garage. Talk about your motivations for STEM and like how you see your subject. Like I talked about how my interview at least, like how I see biology as like intuitive and playful at times. And that's how I communicate biology when I'm like teaching in workshops. And so really it's like those like I talked about how I view biology as like movie sequences, right? And like scenes in a play like those kinds of things, which like are like unique to you and not other people, like how you study, like how you envision the world. Kind of broad, but that's pretty much what it is. Because like even on their website, MIT says to apply sideways, which I never understood what that meant until I pressed submit on my application, which is kind of weird. Because if you look at their blog, it's a really good blog. I recommend it to everybody who's applying to MIT. It talks about like whatever you do, just talk about how you do the most of that. And you are not just doing a bunch of things that you think will get into a college, but you do what you truly like. And those are the people that I'm seeing getting in.
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting in terms of like motivation is like a lot of times is like a lot of people so the thing is like it's really hard to have like really te like a lot of people worry about being unique and having like really like like very like weird ECs and stuff like that. But just one thing I've noticed is that a lot of people who are getting in have normal ECs. It's just like their motivations and their paths to that lead to those ECs are different, and that's what you need to talk about. Don't talk
Mhm.
about like the EC itself, but like your motivation and your reasoning for doing these ECs because that will be unique, right? And that will make you like your own person. So I think that's
No,
a very good point. But yeah,
for sure.
it's more
I mean,
so
also
like
like one thing to interject as well there is that keep in mind, especially for MIT, because I know a lot of people have this preconception. Most people there are not your international Olympiad winners who are applying to MIT or even getting in. Like 95% aren't. That means like 95% of those kids are like regular people. And a lot of MIT people are like regular people. They're not these gods. They
yeah,
just have really unique stories to tell. That means it is doable and feasible for almost everybody.
I think
I'm
so too.
presuming you have the good grades for it, obviously. But
I think the
Yeah,
most important thing is just like make sure that like you're always like because in high school you just want to make sure you're challenging yourself and you're like kind of uncomfortable too because that will make stories and experiences. Like if you
that's a
don't do
great
that,
point you just said.
yeah,
Challenging yourself and being willing to do something that's uncomfortable. So that extends to writing your essays, taking risks in them, but also in your ECs. Um, I think AOs probably dig that, you know.
yeah. Like one thing I wish is like in high school, like just don't be afraid to fail or like don't like if you feel like inferior, like don't be afraid to feel inferior because it's much better to like do something and fail than not to do it at all. Because in
For
fact,
sure.
the most like interesting stories that I've read on essays and that I've wrote are like places where like I tried for this but I didn't get there, but then what I actually learned, that's more valid because all these titles, like when we go to college and stuff, like all these awards and titles, they vanish. But what doesn't vanish is like our efforts and what we learn. Like a lot of people like don't make like top colleges, but it's more so like even if you don't make top colleges, like just because you strive for those colleges and you
Yeah.
strive to be uncomfortable, you now have these skills that will set you up for life and like allow you to move. Because like he's a camper, right? But like after he goes to college, like that doesn't even matter
Doesn't
anymore.
matter
So
anymore,
it
right?
vanishes,
Doesn't
right?
matter.
But what he's gotten is like his skills. So that's why to a lot of people's like that's why honors like that's why a lot of people say like even for my honor section is not like as crazy as people might think, but it's
Coco
like
King?
yeah, I have Homecoming King on there. Like it's just like these titles don't really matter, and that's why honors don't matter much. It's like activities, just like what you do and like the skills that you gain that do matter, and it's like the mindset that you have. Like that's what makes you unique, and that's
No,
how you
yeah,
can like appeal to colleges. I think if you just have this mindset of like not worrying when you're writing an essay, literally do not think about what other people might think of it.
for
Just
sure.
write it for you. Like
Yeah.
once you do that, you'll have good essays. Um,
So one thing on that note is specific to MIT as well. I know a lot of people are like, you have to have like these huge research things, right? And I mentioned this earlier. Like, I didn't do a single science fair, didn't do a single paper publication. And in fact, one of the essays about putting yourself in an uncomfortable position, I read about like my complete failure when it came to the lab and like doing the lab protocols that actually resulted in results that were unpublishable. I spent an entire summer like wasting my time in that lab, like pipetting, and I talked about what it taught me, right? Like everything you've done in your life has taught you something. And so a lot of people, things like, they expect you, like, I have to be papers, right? I have to have this. I don't want to show that I'm a failure in this. Like, they don't expect you as high schoolers to have papers. That's like a crazy,
yeah,
like, people become so desensitized to the research game in high school that it's crazy. It is, if you're a high schooler, you shouldn't have a paper published, right?
yeah,
Like, those ISF kids are crazy, don't get me wrong, right? But like it's not expected to do those things. But like, if they're trying to admit someone who they think could be a good researcher for their labs, like they want to have someone that's like, they have experience in the lab, but they know when they failed and they've learned from those failures. And so I think just be fine expressing who you are. Don't try to be who you think colleges
yeah.
want. That's a mistake I made for my Ivies when I applied, and I got rejected from both of them. But for MIT, I spent like 6 months in that application. So I just went like purely into like what I was.
Yeah,
As a,
it's like for these really good out like it's really just obvious when a kid wants it like in their
Mhm.
essays like it definitely screams like some of my applications like I just applied like because it's on US News ranking and like those ones you probably get rejected like if you just really show that you're very like Vishal's very MIT inclined like he's been wanting it since like I don't know middle school maybe right or
Yeah.
yeah he's very MIT so that's what I'm saying like even for myself like if you're like naturally inclined, I really do think you can get it. But the just main thing is just make sure you're not like BSing or faking anything, and then just not being afraid to be vulnerable. Like I think vulnerability is the most important thing. Like
Key.
do not be afraid to like be failure or something like because when you're vulnerable, like I know some people might be like hesitant, but like if you're hesitant about writing something, chances are write about that thing and like keep that note
Yep.
down.
Or
And
to an extent, obviously, some things like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
better not
Well,
to
yeah,
put an
yeah. Yeah.
essay.
That's not a good
But
like
like,
general principle,
like,
but
if
in
you're like
terms of like,
arrested somehow,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't
Don't worry
know.
about that. But again, just vulnerable and just really authentic. I really do not think these are cliches. These are cliches that will get you far into the college mission. Like obviously, it's very
You'll sound
random.
like cliches now until you start writing your
Yeah,
essays,
you'll
you
realize
realize
that
what you're saying
this
is
is
like correct.
yeah.
Um,
But anyways,
Also for community as well, the MIT prompt about community, I will say community can mean a lot of things. Don't just think it means like going to the food bank and volunteering. It can mean a lot of different things. So take time, like even if you think, I know when I was applying to MIT, I was kind of scared because I didn't do any of that stuff. Like I was in an NHS. I had barely like my volunteering came from like biology tournaments, okay? So it was
but if
like I didn't really like help the community in that aspect. Which I guess I did in a sense. But community can mean a lot of different things. Don't just try to do the cookie cutter thing, right? Like, I went to the food bank and help people. If you really
Yeah,
like did some meaningful things in that food bank, go ahead, right?
yeah.
But if you're just like getting like
Doing, yeah,
volunteer hours here and there and you try to write about how it changed your life,
yeah,
like
don't.
they're probably going to see through that. To be unique, and the one thing as well is that people often say like, oh my, like I didn't have like like this like handicap or like this disability or like this thing I can add to my like spike. That's not even the point. Not even that like it's wrong, which I do think it is wrong. In terms of like the diversity stuff. It's straight up
Yeah,
that everybody is unique. It has the potential to have something unique about them. Everybody has that because
exactly.
you've lived like 17 years of your life or 16 years of your life. Like there got to be some things in there. Like statistically, it is a certainty that you
Yeah, yeah,
have some things that are like unique about yourself, and you might not think it's unique about yourself, but chances are it is. So that's why I recommend everybody brainstorm about their lives for like a month and just really just get deep into that. Because you can highlight your uniqueness, then that's how you see all the people getting into colleges, but they don't like have what people consider
yeah.
like diversity spikes or whatnot.
It's really just like a lot like just in terms of that like colleges care a lot about experiences and that's just what but however you obtain that experience is important and I just think you're right about that and yeah I think those are some really good advice and I would recommend for upcoming juniors just make sure that it is a rough season like even the things we're saying like I still got rejected from a bunch of schools so I'm definitely not like a god at this so it's
Me
really hard
neither.
and
Yeah,
you will get rejected for like it
you
is hard
will.
like
Well, I have some friends. I have some friends who have low key have not been rejected, but they're like go.
Okay,
They're
well,
God.
those are like insane. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
like
they go
it's
on to like
insane.
every Ivy, but no, like I've seen campers. I've seen international Olympiad winners rejected
Yeah,
from
it's
Ivy.
crazy.
It
It's
is
crazy.
it
It's
is
really
that should not be discouraging. That
they
should be
don't. Oh
encouraging.
yeah,
It means
yeah,
you don't have to do all that, and they accepted 1,000 other kids who weren't like ISF winners or like
yeah.
IMO or like IBO or like IMO winners or whatnot, right?
And I think that's what just makes it fun. Like if it was just
Makes
like
it
all
fun.
pretty gritty, it would be boring. But anyways, I think that's it. I think that's it. Do
Mm.
you have any last words? Any tips?
Um, I think overall we summed it up, but just be yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
College applications is rough. I know that, but what I've noticed is that for the colleges that I had fun writing the essays,
Yep.
I got into those schools. And I think if you're being genuine and authentic, a good litmus test for that is, are you having fun writing those essays?
Yep, for
If you're
sure.
having fun writing those essays, then you're doing a good job. And I would keep going with it. Even if someone tells you the essay is bad, it might actually low key be bad.
It might be bad, but
It could be bad. But chances are, if you're having fun writing that essay, that means you're going deep into your personal experiences and you're telling a story that only you could have created. Just be yourself. If you read your essays and they could sound like any other kid from your school could have written them essays,
it's
then
not. Yeah.
that's not what you want to have. You have personality, voice, and passion.
All right.
And that's what I'll say. Um, that's pretty much it. But overall, MIT is a great school. You all should all apply. No bias.
For sure, for sure. I think
Um,
CMU is better, but no, that's just my opinion.
I, you
Yeah,
know,
but
a little rivalry going on there. But
anyways, if you have any comments, any questions, we can do future videos. But
yeah.
yeah, that was a really good thing. All
And
right,
thank you so much for letting me having me this interview, Fiki.
yeah, for sure. All right,
All right.
I'm gonna end the recording. Is it this? Oh wait, I was about to end meeting for all. Okay.